Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
On this episode of the Video Archives podcast, Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary catch their train, but only by a narrow margin. A Los Angeles district attorney attempts to take his witness back to the United States to testify against the mob boss he's been dying to nab. The catch? She doesn't want anything to do with him. An on-the-run train movie directed by Video Archives favorite Peter Hyams, Quentin and Roger discuss where Gene Hackman and Anne Archer were in their careers, the gender role dynamics of the characters, and how their viewing of this movie influenced the future of film forever. Remember, folks, between a viewer and a film, there is only a narrow margin. Next up, a blood vengeance beyond death wish. Every 24 hours, an American family will be killed by radical assassins. If the CIA, FBI, and police can't stop them, the human factor will. When a top computer expert's family is killed in cold blood, it's through his violent vendetta that the diabolical terrorists will be caught. Roger and Quentin discuss the important place where this revenge-o-matic sits in the genre, give a brief lesson on director Edward Dmytryk, and discuss the show-stopping last 10 minutes that need to be seen to be believed. Plus, who is Sybil Danning, and why is she on the back of my box? Shocky Doo and I are ready for the answers. Are you? And lastly, let's head on over to Riverside, where the street violence is so out of control that we've no doubt reached the kill point. When a Riverside cop investigates the rape and murder of his wife, he uncovers the plot of a ruthless gang who have robbed the National Guard. Featuring actors such as Leo Fong, Richard Roundtree, Cameron Mitchell, and Stack Pierce, you know this movie has Video Archives written all over it. Quentin and Roger discuss their enjoyment upon seeing the film, how getting the real-life police force involved benefited the production, and what other movies we may want to check out from director Frank Harris. I'm Gala Avery, and joining us now, here's Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the second season of the Video Archives podcast.
Yay!
Yay! As per usual, I am your host, Quentin Tarantino, joined by my co-host,
Roger Avary.
And we are here with three very exciting movies to talk about.
Full of revelations, I have to say. Since watching these, I have not been able to stop thinking, actually, about all three of the films. All three had a big impact on me.
I mean, it seemed like it was planned because they're three action movies. There's not a variation that much. But even having said that, I was actually kind of surprised at how well all three kind of played with each other, all right? Almost in a weird way built off of each other. I don't really know who's going to win Best Director because they're all three very well-directed movies. Yeah, a case could be made for any one of the three guys. Wouldn't you say?
I actually agonized over it for a short while. I actually was agonizing over it and thinking about it, and I really finally boiled it down to two, which I'll reveal at the end when we do our awards, but I
think I know whose mine is, but I'm going to leave myself open that after we get through talking.
I'm always open for change. I'm always open for change, but I'm pretty damn certain I know who is my favorite director of this bunch.
I saw a man get murdered.
You get on the train, lock the door.
This year, a name for suspense.
They got automatic weapons. If they see you, they're gonna kill you.
Is Narrow Margin.
The people I work for want the woman.
What woman?
This is my life we're dealing with.
Gene Hackman.
We can't get off the train.
Anne Archer.
I don't want to die.
Narrow Margin.
Starts Friday, September 21st at a theater near you.
I have to say, I've heard tell, because I'm not the one that goes on following our jet stream online. I don't really make it a point of doing that much. But from what I've heard, that after our first season, there is a lot more talk about Peter Hyams being taken seriously as a filmmaker and people making it a point to talk about them on their shows.
As an American auteur.
As an American auteur and as an action film specialist.
Yeah.
Well, he always was an action film specialist, but as an action film master. Than I think there was before we did this show. And that makes me very gratified. Well, we're continuing along those lines with Narrow Margin from 1990. So this is a remake of a 40s Richard Fleischer movie, I think done for RKO with Charles McGraw and Marie Windsor, which I meant to watch again for this, and then I decided against it because I've seen Narrow Margin. I saw it in the 80s on video, and I liked it well enough, but I'd heard so much about it. I didn't find it quite as memorable as everyone had always said, but I think I probably would change my mind about it. But it was a fun movie. But I'm guessing that the producers, Carolco, whoever it was that made the film, got the remake rights. Not so much, hey, let's remake this movie and do a new version of it. More like, oh, okay, it's a train movie. It's got a good premise, and we could take this and do what we want with it. So I didn't want to really compare it that much against the first one. I didn't think it was that important because this kind of in its own way, it stands or doesn't stand on its own for what it is.
Hey, Quentin, why don't you read the back of the box?
Okie dokie. Between a witness and a victim, there is a narrow margin.
Narrow margin indeed.
Narrow Margin, Gene Hackman, Mississippi Burning, The Package, and the Academy Award-winning French Connection, stars as an LA district attorney attempting to take an unwilling murder witness, Ann Archer, Academy Award nominee for Fatal Attraction, back to the United States to testify against a top-level mob boss. Frantically attempting to escape two deadly hitmen sent to silence her, they board a Vancouver-bound train only to discover that the killers are on board with them. For the next 20 hours, as the train hurls through the beautiful but isolated Canadian wilderness, a deadly game of cat and mouse ensues in which Hackman's ability to tell friend from foe is a matter of life and death. Approximate running time, 99 minutes. 1990, live home video. Ann Archer, at the beginning of the film, goes on a blind date with a J.T. Walsh.
He is perfectly cast here.
He's perfect.
He's always usually kind of a certain type.
Yeah.
But here, playing this lawyer, this smarmy lawyer, is perfect.
He really is perfect. Well, it just shows what a good actor he is,
Yeah.
actually. He almost specialized in playing cliched characters, and he always added a layer of humanity to those cliched characters. So she's on a blind date with him. He's a lawyer. They end up having a pretty good time, and they end up going up to his apartment or his house or whatever. She goes into the bathroom to freshen up or something, and then there's a knock on the door. He answers it, and then it's one of the mob bosses that employs him comes in with his gangsters, played by Harris Yulin. And it turns out that J.T. Walsh had stolen some money from the mob, and they're calling him on it. And so this whole thing starts playing out, and she's in the bathroom, and she can hear it all, and then they end up killing him. But she hears and sees that it actually is Harris Yulin that kills him, that he's responsible, and she can place him there.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know she's in the bathroom. So the DA has this whole meeting about the murder, and then Gene Hackman shows up. Hey, everything's great. We finally got him. We have a witness. She can place Harris Yulin at the scene. He's the one that did the murder. She heard the whole thing leading up to it. The guy begged for his life. We've got him. They don't know she exists. She's hiding right now.
She found out where she is.
She got the hell out of town. She's hiding in the North Woods. I'm going to go pick her up. We'll talk her into testifying. Don't worry. I'll talk her into it. Don't worry about that. And then we got him. We've got him. We've been trying to get this guy for years, and we got him. So Gene Hackman shows up.
With M. Emmett Walsh.
With M. Emmett Walsh, who's his partner, actually.
Yeah, like the detective he's working with.
And they show up in the North Woods to talk her into testifying. She's adamant she's not going to testify. She's like, I'm very sorry. I understand what you're saying, but I'm scared to death, and I'm hiding out, and nobody knows I was there. Nobody knows who I am, and I am not going to testify, and that's just how it is. And then a helicopter shows up and machine guns everybody. And so the thing about it is that actually the mob did not know where she was. They followed Gene Hackman, knowing that he does know where she was. So Gene Hackman led the mob to her. Now they're going to try to wipe them out. And so now Gene Hackman and her are on the run. And the mob is bringing everybody they can to stop them. And so there's a mad car chase until they get to a point where they actually see a train and they go, hey, if we could get to the train station, we could hop on the train and boom.
And I love that it's like the Trans-Canada Railway. So he's like, what's the nearest stop? And he's like, well, that'll be in 27 hours. That'll be, Alberta or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it was also funny because they're big chase through the forest, and then he sees the train, and he goes, "Hey, maybe we can get on the train, and that can get us out of here." And then Roger goes, "Oh my God, it's gonna turn into a train movie." So now they're on the train. And once they get to their stop, everything should be fine because they'll have all the deputies and everything waiting. But he knows that there's some killers on the train right now. So he's got to keep her, he's got to find out who these killers are and keep her alive during all this.
And kind of hidden.
And keep her hidden through all this. And so that's pretty much the setup for the film. Now, you had never seen it before, right?
Well, okay. This is where the confession comes out. Mm-hmm. And it's less of a confession than like a remembered memory. I had seen this film. I had obviously seen this film in 1990. And before I tell you any more, I just want to say that when I saw the movie, I don't think I was actually impressed with it at all.
At all?
To me...
Did you see it at the theaters or on HBO?
I saw this at theaters. Mm-hmm. To me, it was kind of late stage Peter Hyams. Right? Like, I am a huge Peter Hyams. I don't mean that.
I would actually still call it late stage Peter Hyams, but not necessarily in a bad way.
I want to say that I, having watched the movie again, I've reevaluated it, and I love the movie, and I thought that I didn't like it, but I actually wrote a screenplay that was a response to this. And that screenplay I brought with me.
Pandemonium Reigns?
And it's called Pandemonium Reigns. And I was curious about it. So I looked at
You won an Oscar for that screenplay, didn't you?
I apparently did. And I looked at, I had forgotten seeing this, but I had seen the movie and then written a response film about it. I was so either taken by it and literally I looked at the date on my screenplay, the first draft, it says here, first draft, April 10th, 1991, which is just after the movie is released late 1990.
Well, and actually, Roger's screenplay for Pandemonium Reigns was taken by me. The train stuff was cut out.
You cut out all the train. It would be like if you did Narrow Margin without the train.
Yeah, I cut out all the train stuff and then incorporated it into the script for Pulp Fiction, which me and Roger later won an Oscar for.
It's like he's aiming his gun at the engineer who's driving the train and the assistant engineer who is standing with his hands raised. Gentlemen, we are taking control of this train. It's like a typical Roger script. And then the engineer immediately jumps up and rushes him. Like he doesn't freeze at all in the face of a gun.
The only part that I remember from the actual this happens, that happens from the train section is when Butch, the hero, you incapacitate him by handcuffing his wrist, all right, to a pipe in the train. Yeah. So he's stuck to the wall. And then he gets out of it in a way I've never seen anybody get out of a handcuff situation before. He just squeezes his hand through the handcuff. So the skin comes off.
He gloves himself.
The skin comes off. He breaks his finger. He breaks his hand. He just squeezes his hand.
He has to get out of the cuffs. And I locked him in the handcuffs and I'm like, okay, well, how's he going to get out? I'm like, well, how would I get out of handcuffs? Well, if I have to chew my hand off like a coyote, I'll do it. And so,
like 127 hours.
And the situation in the script was they're on the train and like right after he kills the engineer or whatever, they put like a toolbox on the gas pedal. I didn't even know if a train has a gas pedal, but they put a toolbox on the gas pedal and then they go off and do their thing and a bunch of guys get killed. Nobody knows. And the engineer door is all locked up. So the train is just like bearing along at 100 miles an hour.
It's like a runaway train.
It's a runaway train and everybody's busy doing all their nonsense, like all their Roger nonsense. And so he's like locked up and he knows the train is there. And he's like, okay, it's either the train crashes and we all die or I, glove my hand.
So Roger, as a writer, you figured like I could have him eat his hand off or I could have him yank it through the hole.
Just pull it out. Just pull that fucker out. I'm watching the movie and I'm like, wait a minute. This is kind of coming back to me. It came back to me once they were on the train. I've seen this movie. And I remember this film. And I kind of remember like wanting a response to it.
Yeah.
But then I was very attracted to all the train stuff, apparently. The character that I wanted you to play, which was this scrappy guy, he gets left behind somewhere in like Detroit or somewhere, wherever they start their train trip. He gets left behind and he knows something. He's got to tell them. So he's got to get to the next stop before the train does. And the train is going really fast. And so he's like, just like, and that's actually the funniest thing in the script as I reread it was he is just hauling ass across the country, just crashing, running every light,
is he like the guy? Is he like the guy in Unstoppable that ends up saving the day?
Yeah, well, he dies eventually, but it's you, and he does save the day in his own way.
You know who I'm talking about? That hillbilly guy?
Yeah. And so, when Ann Archer first shows up, and she's meeting
J.T. Walsh.
J.T. Walsh. And they're having this kind of sweet little date. And she's like kind of a mature, sophisticated, like, you know, divorced woman. Or I think she's divorced.
I think it's probably a divorcee, yeah.
And it sounds like her husband has cheated on her or something, or left her, or gone off with a younger woman. And now she's independent.
And Archer has been around for a long time, but she's just had a smash with a Fatal Attraction, I think the year before. Yeah.
I was shocked. I looked up Ann Archer and it was like, okay, she's in like, you know, Mod Squad in 1971 and Little House on the Prairie in 1975.
Oh, no, she's like,
she's in TV, like she's everywhere.
Oh, no, she's like the young Tootsie, you know, showing up in movies in 69 and 70, 71.
Yeah. And she breaks with Trackdown in 76. And then after that, Paradise Alley, and then boom.
I always remember her from Lifeguard.
Yeah.
She's the girl in Lifeguard.
Yeah. And so, but it wasn't until Fatal Attraction when it was like, boom, when suddenly everyone knew who she was.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, she's the star of this movie. And what I love about her character is she's fine.
Yeah.
You know, her husband's left and she's actually kind of okay with it. And she's driven herself there. And he even makes like a little note about it. And she's like, no, I like to drive myself. You know, I prefer to drive. And he's like, well, you know, is that so you can like leave at any time? And then and they're actually having dinner in his hotel because he's visiting the city.
Oh, that's what it is.
And he's upstairs. They're actually at the Four Seasons in Vancouver. And he's got to do this meeting. And so he kind of talks her into coming upstairs, and it kind of sounds like it could be a line, and she's not really into it, but she agrees to do it because he plays it really well. He plays it with a lot of sincerity.
No, I mean, one of the things, actually,
it's not a line. I'm just inviting you up just so that I'm not leaving you here at the table.
And I don't think it's a line, and I don't think she does, or she wouldn't go up with him. I mean, actually, I think one of the things that actually makes the movie work is the fact that their date is actually very successful in a realistic expectation for a blind date.
Yeah.
J.T. Walsh and Ann Archer actually have a nice chemistry. It's not overblown.
Yeah.
They're not falling in love, but for going out, because friends suggested it in a nice environment like this, and they're two attractive, mature people, a lot younger than we are now. All right. You know, but the thing is, there's a nice connection between them. It's a genuinely nice scene, especially considering that the movie's going to be a nonstop chase movie.
Yeah.
Once it gets going, it's actually nice to have such breadth in the opening.
I think she is this movie. She's the heart of this movie. And in fact, I think she's the point Peter Hyams is making. I mean, the first movie, The Narrow Margin, does have a kind of dialogue. It's men, it's women, it's trains going into tunnels. It's the relationship between men and women. Yeah. Peter Hyams takes that and he says, let's subvert slightly all the male tropes of all these action movies that I'm building upon, and let's make it that the men are just showing up and fucking everything up at every juncture along the way. There comes a point when she's on that train where he's like, okay, and this next one we can both get off and we can do this. She's like, look, I'm getting off and you're not getting off. Like, I'm getting off alone without you. Like, I don't need you. You keep bringing garbage into my life, which they do. Like, she would be fine without the men.
That's true.
Peter Hyams is so flashy in this film without being showboaty.
Yeah.
Like he's using true cinema. He was doing things like when she's in the room and the killer is there and she's hiding behind the door and the killer walks up and there's this kind of crack of light just barely landing on her face through the door. And the guy is standing right there and he's constantly making the point visually that there is a narrow margin, literally, in between men and women.
Yeah.
That moment where Emmett Walsh and Gene Hackman are trying to talk her in her little cabin, and Peter Hyams is holding on this long shot, and Emmett Walsh is delivering a long bit of dialogue.
Yeah.
Like, lady, let me tell you, blah, blah, blah. And he's given his whole rationale.
And she lives in like a big, like, ski lodge in the middle of a Canadian forest, you know, so it's like, you know, with the pointed roofs and everything, and a huge frame.
And then all of a sudden, like gunfire goes off, and Emmett Walsh is shot up with like a dozen squibs.
Because like a lot of these ski lodges, it's all about the view. So it has a glass wall, and then all of a sudden the helicopter lowers to the glass and tries to wipe everybody out.
Now, the art of that is he's got actors. I mean, you've got people with their finger on a red button that like sets explosives off.
Yeah.
And you've got actors, and they're doing it on the actor's line. They're doing it on Emmett Walsh's little button of a line.
And you don't have young actors. You have older actors, and the whole splintery, glassy world explodes around them.
Yeah, and that was the moment where I kind of realized, this is like peak Hollywood.
Yeah.
This is, Carolco at the same year they're doing Total Recall,
and
Jacob's Ladder,
Rambo 3,
Rambo 3. They are at the peak of who they are, and Hollywood is all the craftsmen are at full steam, and this is a big Hollywood production in Canada.
This is what Carolco does,
and this is exactly what they do. This kind of action film, and it's great. It is so hard to do that scene, and then in fact then they run out and he's like, where are the keys? Where are the keys? And he grabs the keys and he's like, get in, I'll drive.
Yeah.
And it's like, after this whole moment, the only thing we really know about her character is she likes to drive.
Yeah.
Herself.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's like, I'll drive. And he drives like fucking Mr. Magoo down the mountain.
Yeah, because he can't go on the roads. He has to drive through the trees and everything. And then
it's ridiculous how
and it's one of the great Peter Hyams chase scenes. Because it's not on a street. It is like
he's driving down a mountain.
He's driving down a mountain and trying to avoid trees and
while a
tree
helicopter
stumps.
is shooting at him.
And while the helicopter is like trying to pick him off.
It's great.
I almost had a similar response. I liked Narrow Margin when it came out because I was always a Peter Hyams fan and I saw everything coming out like when it came out. I remember seeing it with Grace. I actually remember Grace liking it a little bit more than me. I remember thinking it was missing something. I liked it. I liked it for what it was, but it was missing something. Now, here's the way I feel about it now. I do feel it is missing something, and I'll get to what I think it's missing. But what it has is so good that I just feel guilty for not appreciating what it did offer me more then.
That's exactly how I feel. Exactly how I feel. I feel almost guilty that I was not appreciating Hollywood in general and the immense craftsmanship that goes into films like this.
And then and it all comes down to what you're saying. Once the movie starts its chase, it really, really never lets up, and it does a good job keeping its foot on the accelerator pretty much all the way to the very end. And pretty much once they get to where they're going, the movie's over. All right, here, roll credits. I mean, the credits happen immediately. All right,
instantly.
It's like a '30s movie. Okay, it just ends.
Yeah.
But that fucking shootout in the cabin, it's magnificent. It's just so great. And
I knew it was coming, and I still jumped. I still had a heart jump. Like,
and I didn't remember it. And it's so well done. It was such a surprise. We're ruining the surprise, I know. But you don't need the surprise part.
You actually don't. It actually still surprised me.
It's got to be in the top 3 Hyams action sequences. I mean, it's just so fantastic. And a case could be made that it never stops after that.
Yeah.
It manages to keep kind of, doubling down and extending. I think this is probably my last official Peter Hyams movie that I'm like 100% on board. And after this is when he started getting into Jean-Claude Van Damme world. And then there was this like star vehicle wonkiness.
He's directing it.
Yeah.
He's shooting it. Mm-hmm. He's one of the writers on it. He's not editing it like he commonly would, but that's because he's working with James Mitchell, who edited like Busting. He edited Capricorn 1. Star Chamber, 2010, Running Scared, The Presidio, like these guys were tight.
One of the things that maybe made us take this movie just a little bit for granted, and this is actually understandable, even though it's almost unfathomable now that we would take this for granted, is the whole Gene Hackman of it all. This is at the time when Gene Hackman was starring in 3 movies a year and featured roles in 2 or 3 other movies a year. So you just kind of took it for granted a little bit. And there is even an aspect in Narrow Margin that they're taking Gene Hackman for granted. In any other movie there would be a setup to Gene Hackman's character. There would be some introduction. There would be him waking up in the morning. He's got a wife. He deals with his wife. He gets to his job and has a banter with his partner, Emmett Walsh, some girl he's flirting with at the offices. There would be some sort of setup. There's no setup. The fact that he's Gene Hackman.
He doesn't even do the exposition, basically. The MMA, like, he doesn't even explain the mission. He lets somebody else do it.
This is a movie that's on the run. He introduces himself on the run. He introduces himself into the exposition scene as he takes over the exposition. And now I guess we're just following this guy. But this guy's Gene Hackman. I'm sure if I was to say to Peter Hyams, well, don't we think we need to introduce Gene Hackman's character? You need to introduce Gene Hackman? He does 5 movies a fucking year. What do you need to introduce? He's Gene Hackman. He's the cop. What else do you need to know? And he's right. We don't really need to know anything else.
Mm-hmm. Gene Hackman
he's
knows
not a
that.
character. He's Gene Hackman.
And he doesn't want to do all of that garbage exposition. And so he's literally doing the Steve McQueen thing that you described.
He is.
Where he's like, I'm just going to peel an apple.
I mean,
like, I'm going to let Emmett Walsh do his thing. I'm just going to keep saying in the middle of his lines, you like that? You're going to love this.
Yeah, but yeah. He's actually able to pull it off because it's not a boring exposition scene. Gene Hackman is having so much fun describing the exposition with this, like, it gets better than that. There's a witness. Oh, and it gets better than that. He did the murder. Oh, and it gets better than that.
If you like that, you're going to love this.
Yeah, right.
And then Emmett Walsh starts talking again. And it's great because you have Emmett Walsh and then you've got J.A. Preston, who's just such a great character actor.
Yeah, he's wonderful, yeah.
Not interested at all in anything. What he wants is just to get reelected.
Yeah.
And Gene Hackman, that's the maximum he goes in that scene. It's basically saying, well, this could look good on your reelection. Or, this would look good for you, right?
Well, no.
You like press, right?
Yeah, well, Gene Hackman is basically playing Bullet, and J.A. Preston is basically playing Robert Vaughn.
Yeah.
And Anna Hercher is the person who gets killed at the beginning of Bullet.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Listen, another person that we have to mention is Canadian national treasure Susan Hogan.
Oh, Susan Hogan, absolutely. Susan Hogan's subplot is such a clever subplot that ends up developing. They ultimately can't take it all the way, but
they jump the shark a little bit.
They do jump the shark. It's an absolute jumping of the shark. But before that,
Susan Hogan playing the horny woman.
Yeah.
On the train.
Well, what happens is the killers don't know what Ann Archer looks like. So they know that he's protecting a woman, and then he meets another woman on the train, and then the killers think Susan Hogan's the woman. So
she's just another divorcee, and she meets Gene Hackman, and he looks like a nice guy.
Yeah.
And
So now Gene Hackman has 2 women to protect from, like, syndicate murderers who own machine guns. To me, the only negative, I mean, there's certain things in the film. I mean, I actually, even though I normally do like Harris Yulin, I don't really care for him in this movie. It's a very cliched villain role. He's all gravelly voice. If it wasn't him,
he's pulled out of central casting for that one.
Yeah,
like that's like, what do you need? You need a mob boss. Let's get Harris. Get over here.
Yeah, Dan Hania could have played that character,
sure.
And he doesn't play it any different. Towards the end, a very wonky plot contrivance rears its head that doesn't do the movie any favors or justice, actually lowers it just a little bit as far as its cheesiness to some degree or another. But the biggest issue with Narrow Margin to me, frankly, is it's stalled at an upper 8 when it kind of wants to go to 9. Because it's just lacking something unique. It's lacking something to make it even more solid, to bring everything else together. If there was another story element that actually really worked, that made it more memorable. There's a reason why we watched the movie and then completely forgot it. And then watch it again and realize, well, what was our problem? This is so entertaining. Because as entertaining as it is in the moment, it's actually not that memorable.
Yeah.
It needed one other thing to make it more unique. As it is, for what it is, it's as good as it can possibly be. This is the perfect example of this level of movie done as well as it can be. Yet I believe it creates a ceiling that stops it at 8. When the technique is driving it to 9. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. And we're back with my daughter, Gala. Gala.
Hey, Gala.
Hey guys, I'm back. Can't get rid of me that easily. So I have to give a shout out to our loyal listeners who put together our letterbox list. Because of them, I was actually able to see that this was mentioned in our episode 3 of Video Archives podcast season 1.
Really? Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we have been percolating. Of course, we did a Peter Hyams, I think it was The Relic that we did for episode 3. So we were percolating, but it's really fun to see how the movies intersect, and that I know quite a few people that are watching through movies that we have talked about on episodes or just briefly mentioned in passing because they relate to the movies that we talked about. So super cool that I was able to go back and get those analytics because I'm such a nerd with that kind of stuff. I just love it. Dad, I did not know this about Pandemonium Reigns.
I didn't know about Pandemonium Reigns until he just said it.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I didn't even know. I had long since suppressed and forgotten this this impetus, and I started going through it and like reading all of the train stuff. It's like there's this one scene, they're in a sleeping car of the train, like just the way they were in the movie, and they make a stop at a place, but they've been having sex, and so they're like asleep and laying there, like, you know,
Butch and Fabian.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They're unpacking. They're in this kind of first class thing. The train has stopped, and it's like, should we be getting up? Like, because they're just like laying there at a stop place, and there's people walking around on the platform. No. Well, I feel kind of weird just laying here with all those people out there. I had also gone on a train trip simultaneously to visit my father. I took a train from Los Angeles to Louisiana, and my dad was working in Louisiana. And so I went and I lived in Louisiana just for a short time, and I took the train. And I believe that was around this time.
Roy Cameron Avery.
Yeah.
Roy Cameron Avery, yes. The Demonoid. My dad, the actor from Demonoid.
So basically, if you were to see what Mary Marger would be starring Butch and Fabian.
This is it. This is what would happen. So, yeah. So, and I was like,
it's like so amazing to imagine.
Well, I had to ask as I realized that before we were coming in here, I was like, did Quentin do this intentionally? Did he know? Does Quentin know? Because we're coming back into the Video Archives podcast thing again.
I've been manipulating you for 40 years.
Yeah, the master manipulator.
The long con.
The long con, man.
Okay. It all leads up to this moment right here.
We're going to adapt that part of the script into Pulp Fiction.
Getting back to Gala's opinion on the film.
Well, I was going to say, Dad, you passed your love of trains to me because
because you're the train killer lover.
Quentin,
the train killer lover.
Quentin, I have like 6 copies of The Train Killer now.
Oh,
People
wow.
keep giving
She's cornering the market.
I have a beta tape. People just keep on giving them to me.
Gala, the Train Killer Avery.
I'm gonna go as Matushka for Halloween. And how will people know?
She's actually worked on a...
They won't. They'll just like assume what I am. You don't know that I'm the train killer. It's an undercover thing.
No one knows Matryoshka's the
no one knew that Matushka was. Anyway, Dad passed the train gene to me, obviously. I love train movies. And also, of course, Cafe Express was the other train movie that we covered last season that I just absolutely loved. Okay, so this movie, I have been going on a lot of blind dates, like a lot. It is basically the only way that you date now.
It's very distressing.
It is literally the only way that you date now.
You're not really blind. Like you have something like a picture.
But she's mutual friends. And so like she's heard about him, she knows about him, someone can actually vouch for him.
Do you go on classic blind dates where a friend tells you about somebody else?
I wish I did.
No, there's nothing is real anymore. Everything has to be done through an app.
I wish I was going on dates where a friend was setting up, but no. But when I was watching this, I was thinking you could totally remake this with like a girl that's like going on a blind date from like Raya specifically, because it's like, okay, he's like a businessman coming to town and stuff. And it'd be actually really interesting to have it kind of be set up in the modern world with a girl going on a blind date like that.
You almost don't have to rewrite it because
at all.
She's basically on a date her friend set up.
No, but actually one of the things that's actually, you got me thinking, one of the things that's actually good about the movie, and that would be good about the movie now, is, there is an antiquated aspect to trains unless you take them just to, get to your job every day. But even back then in the 80s, there is this throwback aspect to them hopping on a train and everything playing out on a train.
And there's no cell phones. There's, like maybe there's a phone on the train. No, there's not a phone on the train.
Yeah.
I love the Fat Man character.
I love the Fat Man character in it. Yeah.
I want to highlight though just how smart she actually is, because it's not only that she's in the room, because he has to make a phone call. And so he invites her up to the room. And then, of course, the mob boss just shows up and he's shocked and she's in the bathroom. But she's not only so smart that she doesn't scream And she's not only so smart that she doesn't come out after the mob boss starts walking around the hotel room, she actually wipes her fingerprints from the bathroom.
Oh, yeah. She's completely like, I'm going to get out of here. Her one mistake is the friend who set her up on the date.
Yeah,
who we never find out what happened to her, but I'm pretty convinced that friend is dead.
Well, yeah, because she calls her friend from the hotel room basically to tell her what's happened. And that is the one mistake, because that's the person that gives her up when the DA goes and tracks the friend down, etc.
And eventually the mobsters
as well. But it's just, she's so smart because she's like, I'm going to wipe my prints. She's a mother, so she's doing this basically for her child. She has to disappear and separate from her child to save her son's life.
Right, that's right. She has a son
and
or a
she's
daughter.
Hiding out at like her brother-in-law's cabin or something like that. So it's all these things. And she's like, look, I will disappear forever to save my son. I will literally forget my life. Like, who cares? Yeah. And she's so good. And then, of course, it's just these bumbling guys.
Yeah, she's got it all figured out. She's got her plan working.
Gene Hackman can't sell competence on the government side when it comes to protecting her. He has brought all the hell that she's going through on her personally.
And I think that's Peter Hyams' point. He's subverting the normal hero of the movie. Suddenly you've got Gene Hackman, and you think, oh, he's Gene Hackman. And there's no real relationship to speak
of. There's
no
romance. There's no romance. No, there's no romance.
They don't. No, that's actually really refreshing.
Yes. Yeah. Because, like, the bad guys really only find her at the cabin because of the cops. Like, they follow the cops to the cabin. And I have to say, the helicopter crash that occurs in this movie is so spectacular. Yeah. When it crashes, when they first get outside, there's, like, some kind of giant explosion.
That's Hollywood at the peak, man. Like, what are we going to do?
All done practically.
And by the way, we're in, British Columbia somewhere, outside of Vancouver, up in the mountains. You're in a forested area. It's a dry forest. It's a forest. And they do a mushroom cloud explosion when that helicopter crashes. Yeah. And I mean, I saw that and I was like, okay, to be able to do that with fire, and that was no small explosion. That was a giant...
In a forest.
In a dense forest, boom, where for sure you've got to have soaker planes nearby, and you've got to have like the fire people there. You've got to be ready for that fire to spread. That was an amazing explosion.
That was back in the days with Carolco.
There's no CGI to back you up.
If it could be done, Carolco could pay to get it done.
And they would do it. Yeah, especially in Canada. In Canada.
To Quentin's point about the incompetence, she has a line basically where she's like, isn't it your job to know like what's going on while they're driving in the car down the mountain? Because he's like, I'll drive. And she's like, God.
Yeah, and she likes to drive herself.
She likes to drive herself. And he's so hungry to catch this mobster that he's become sloppy. Mm-hmm. That's really what it is. He's so hungry because he's chasing, I think on the last job that he got, I think they mentioned like through his partner that he didn't get the guy. He is just so sloppy here. And then they get to the train. And I told Dad this because I just could not believe this. Okay, they get to the train station and they're trying to board the train and there's no spot with a cabin because they want a cabin because he has to hide her. Dad knows where I'm going with this because I couldn't help it. But they need a cabin. And he's like, well, I need a cabin. And they're like, oh, the next train is in 2 days. He's like, no, I need it right now. Because she pretends to be pregnant. And she's like, oh, but like my baby, I'm going into labor. She
stuffs her sweater into her other sweater.
So smart. She's the one that
She's the one getting him on.
Yeah, she's the clever one.
I'm sorry, like, I'm pregnant. I need the cabin. I'm going into labor. We have to go now.
I need to lay down. I need to lay down.
But in her quiet, calm voice.
Like to him.
It never rises. And all of a sudden, this old couple comes up to them and says, you kids need the train cabin more than us. You can have our cabin. And it's like, Gene Hackman is 60 years old.
Yeah, he must be like just...
He's the same age as the old couple.
No, he's not.
He's 60.
Well, they're playing it a little younger, but...
Well, no, they're older, all right? I'm 60. I'm not the age of those fucking people on the train.
You are a spring chicken compared to Gene Hackman in this movie.
If you're going to get real super technical, but the thing about it, though, is Gene Hackman was always way older than all of his leading ladies and everything, but like we just kind of accepted we kind of accepted it.
So like, that was like
he also has a mature look. Like he's a mature actor.
Well, he always, but the thing is, he always had that mature look, even like in 69.
When he gets on the train, it gets a little weird, like when the other woman shows up and she's hitting on him because he goes to the bar to like get a drink because he needs a break from her, kind of, or like gonna get something to eat. And then she's hitting on him.
But she's a Canadian
woman.
She's flirting.
I wouldn't call it hitting.
Well, she's flirting.
Say she's flirting.
Well, she's flirting. She steps on his foot.
She's looking to have some train adventure.
I think he steps on her foot or she steps on his or something. And she's like, I'm clumsy, but I have money. So like, let me buy you a drink. And he's like, no, I'm not that liberated yet. And that's the line that he says. But then they go on a date later in the movie. Don't they go on a date, these two?
They don't go on a date. They just, they like each other, all right?
They're going on a date.
They have it's a drink, or hey, I'm having breakfast. Sit down, all right? We're on a train.
I just thought it was so ridiculous. And there's that really awesome bathroom fight, Quentin.
Yeah.
Which, when he gets off the train, because the two bad guys feed him a line, which is totally incorrect police work.
And by the way, I think there's a bathroom fight in Pandemonium. I just remembered. I had forgotten all about the bathroom fight, but I think I have this big bathroom fight in here.
There's an awesome bathroom fight, and then there's also another scene that I don't want us to describe, because part of the fun of it is it comes out of nowhere. As if any scene could be better than the helicopter scene, there's an out-of-the-blue comedy scene that happens in the film that is so bizarre. I can honestly say, in the midst of a high-action octane movie, I've never seen a comedy scene quite play itself out the way this one comedy scene does. And I don't even want to say anything, because it almost takes the piss out of it. You need it just to happen. But the thing I remember watching that movie and Grace losing it. All right. She thought it was one of the funniest scenes she had seen that year.
Wow. Okay. That Canadian actress who is the comedian in that comedy bit, in that little moment.
Actually, she's the straight man who gets the laugh.
Well, she is. I mean, she is brilliant. She shows up, and I think we rewound it. I said, we have to watch her again.
Yeah.
She's so good. She is amazing in it. And Peter Hyams keeps taking it further and further. And it just it's so funny.
Okay. You know what? That's so unique. That scene is so unique. The movie needed 2 more scenes like that. If the movie had 2 more scenes like that, then my criticism about it not being memorable would disappear.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to talk about the ending of the movie, because that is too good to give away, what happens.
And it's people love that ending.
Yes. But the courtroom part I find just so boring. The fact that it ended on that, for me, it was just I think you mentioned it earlier, it needs an extra 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Because that was just it was so high, and then all of a sudden it was just
It's almost unavoidable. If you're making a movie about, I'm going to take you to court, that we finally did it in the end.
And it's so fun having seen several of Peter Hyams' works now, going through, because I think the first one I saw was Busting. And I don't really think I liked,
the first one you saw was
The
Relic,
Relic, and then Busting. But it's been really educational for me, kind of seeing these movies and getting carried through as the season goes and learning about Peter Hyams. I have a deeper respect for him, and then getting to watch Narrow Margin after I know about him. It's actually a lot of fun.
He's a real craftsman, and he's a craftsman at
technical, but also technical
cinema.
craftsman.
Well, technical and emotional, and he knows how to apply cinematic tools towards emotional arcs and movements inside the story. And he's using cinematic vocabulary to, the best he can in a programmer. What is essentially a Mario Casar and Ivania program.
No, this is their version of a programmer, by all means. It was actually interesting, because I bumped into, maybe I've said the story before. I'll repeat it once. I bumped into Harrison Ford one time at an award ceremony, and I went over to him, and I kind of like talking about a movie that people haven't mentioned to him that much. And so I brought up Hanover Street, because I always really liked that. And he didn't have that great of a time making the movie. So he was like, yeah, well, and I go, well, actually, I actually think Peter Hyams is one of the most underrated action directors of the 70s. And he goes, well, I actually agree with you. He didn't even really like working with him that much, but he recognizes that Peter Hyams is a great action director. And Harrison Ford kind of knows a little bit about working with great action directors.
When it's true, it's true.
Just a little.
Yeah.
When it's true, it's true.
My tape for Narrow Margin is from Avid, while the one from the archives is from Live, and mine cost me $1.49.
And I might just mention that Live was my old boss. They were the home video line of Coralco, and then at some point they decided that if we make movies for $1 million or $2 that we could release them on video, and if it's good enough, we can release them in the theaters. And that's how I was able to make Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, and shortly thereafter, and it was Ronna Wallace actually at Live, and she did Reservoir Dogs, Bad Lieutenant, and then Killing Zoe right after that. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
all three of them.
Also that same year, she also did Light Sleeper and Bob Roberts.
Yeah, That's right.
It was a big year for her.
It
was a big year for her at Cannes that year.
And I really love Rana. She was great.
Rana was fantastic. And the number 2 guy, Richard Gladstein, is pretty much the reason I have a career. But him making the choice to back me on Reservoir Dogs is the reason that I'm sitting here right now.
To hear the rest of this episode, including discussions of 2 more movies and our award winners, sign up for the Video Archives Patreon. You'll get access to full Video Archives episodes, the Video Archives After Show, exclusive merch, and more. Head on over to patreon.com/Video Archives to subscribe today. The Video Archives podcast is hosted by Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery and produced by Josh Richmond and Gala Avery. Find out more about the show and get Video Archives merch at videoarchivespodcast.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Video Archives and on Instagram at Video Archives Pod.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.